Back in 2000, when I was 20, a friend of mine, female 19, decided she wants to get an apartment and asked if I'd be her roommate. I didn't need a place to stay, but decided we'd do it anyway. We moved to a nice apartment complex right next to and behind the house where my aunt saw her dead ex-boyfriend. The place was nice and newer, so the thought of it being haunted never crossed my mind. I didn't even experience anything until my roommate got homesick a month in and had to move back in with her folks, leaving me there alone for about 3 months. It started with the lights coming on by themselves. I would go to bed, always turning the lights off and always closing my bedroom door. I was meticulous about the lights because that's how I was raised. I'd go to bed and at some point my eyes would see light coming in under the door. I thought my roommate came home, so I get out of bed excited to see her, only to discover I was still alone and the dining room or bathroom lights would be on. Then the knocking started. Right after I'd lay down, there would be 3 loud knocks on my bedroom door. Again, I'd think my roommate had come home. I'd get up to greet her, only to see I was still alone. A week or so before Christmas, my roommate and I went out gift shopping and went back to the apartment to wrap everything. When we were done, we were both standing at the door, checking to see if we had everything before leaving. The apartment was completely quiet, and we heard this clearly. My acoustic guitar, which I had leaning up against my wall in the bedroom, with the pick stuck between 3 strings, was plucked, each string in succession, then slid along the wall until hitting the floor. We just looked at each other, then walked to my bedroom to find the guitar on the floor, with the pick still stuck between the strings. Those strings had been plucked, meaning the pick had been used, and then replaced when done. At Christmas, during a party with her and some other friends at the apartment, the VCR turned itself off. It did that 1 or 2 other times while living there, never before or after. For Christmas, my girlfriend got me a guitar tablature book for Pink Floyd's The Wall. One night, I sat on the floor of my bedroom learning how to play a song from it. When I was done, I put the pick in the strings and set my guitar up on the wall. But instead of closing the book as I normally did, I left it open and went to bed. Just after laying down, I heard the pages in the book flipping on their own. It was a thick book, but the song I had been learning was somewhere in the middle. I figured the weight of the pages made it change pages on its own. But when they stopped flicking, I got curious and got up to look. The pages stopped flipping on the song Hey You, and when I read the title, I got chills and shut the book, pleaded with the ghost to let me sleep, and I went back to bed. While laying there, I realised if the pages had flipped on their own from the weight, they would have gone the other way, away from that song. After that, I started calling the ghost Pink. Anytime something happened, I would just say, "Oh, hey Pink." But one night, I'd been out with a friend until about 2 AM, and when I opened my door and stepped in, I could feel the ghost standing there. I said, "Oh, hi Pink," and I could feel the energy go through me and out of the apartment. So that's when I figured it didn't like being called that, which didn't stop me from saying it. Shortly after my roommate came back and stayed the rest of the lease, not much happened then. I figured if an entire house could be haunted, then surely an entire apartment or building could be. I wanted to ask my neighbours if they ever experienced anything, but I never did, and actually never really talked to them at all. And to answer some questions before they happen, my roommate and I are still really good friends. Never dated, never slept together. She was also really good friends with my girlfriend, and it was my girlfriend who told her to ask me to move in with. Also, I've known since I was around 10 or so that I could feel ghosts, but usually only when standing right there where they were. If I stand with them long enough, I usually get an image in my head of what they look like, as well as their mood. In a few instances, I've had them communicate with me like that, their words coming to me as thoughts or images, usually the latter. I usually don't tell people this because they usually don't believe me, and I'd just rather not go through with the ridicule and the name calling. However, with Pink, I never figured out who or what it was. I always felt that it was male, but I'm not sure. I still wonder about it from time to time. My wife used to work at the Great Wolf Lodge in Mason, Ohio. She worked third shift at the front desk for 5 years, and things would happen there constantly. Many times I would take her to work and hang out in the lobby until she got off, instead of making the long drive back home and then back to get her in the morning. Employees she worked with would share stories with me all the time of things that happened to them or to the guests. One room in particular that seems to be the most haunted had reports from guests that something in the middle of the night would jump on their beds. One day, the bathtub overflowed and the water leaked down into the basement. When they checked the room, nobody had been in there, and the room hadn't been rented. It seemed as if a lot of the things that happened there either happened in the lobby or on the first floor. The lobby and the main floor are actually the second floor. Every night they had to print a report and get it from the main office on the first floor. My wife went down the stairs, and while she walked, the elevator started following her from the lobby to the first floor. When she got down there, the doors to it opened, and nobody was on it, nor was there anybody waiting for it. Another night, she had to get the report and was waiting at the doors for the elevator. Behind her, she heard a man say, "You never asked my name." She spun around, but nobody was there. She walked down the halls and found nobody with her anywhere. One night, she got a call from the office, but nobody was supposed to be in there, and it was locked at night. The night shift supervisor went down to check it out with security and found the door to still be locked and nobody in there. That happened quite a bit. One time he came back upstairs from checking, and as soon as he reached the top of the stairs, a phone that sat on the host station at one of the restaurants there rang, so he picked it up. The extension it called from was the office, and he heard nothing but dead air, pardon the pun. A religious man and skeptic, he just laughed it off as he always did, and hung up the phone with a shrug. Another night, she got a call from an extension she didn't recognise, and when she answered it, she heard nothing but dead air. Not even her supervisor knew the extension. After hanging up, she decided to call the extension back, and the phone in front of her supervisor, who sat right next to her at the desk, rang. He picked it up, and they confirmed that it was her that called. Except it wasn't his extension at all, and upon further investigation, they found that extension did not exist anywhere in the hotel. One night I had to use the bathroom, so I walked down the hall off the lobby to the bathroom. As I got it, I looked up and saw someone walking in ahead of me. All I saw was their leg from about the knee down. It appeared to be a white guy, red shorts, white socks and red shoes. I was only a few feet away, yet nobody had been in front of me in the hall, and as I went into the bathroom, I didn't see him. So I looked in each stall and found I was alone. There was absolutely nowhere for him to go. Another night, sometime around Halloween, they had the lobby all decorated and there was a DJ booth. Right around 4:45 in the morning, it began playing a song really loud and scared the hell out of all of us. The supervisor went to shut it off, and after he did, he informed us that it had been off when he came in. I mean, it had been off the whole time I was there too. The place is right next to Kings Island, which is supposed to be haunted, and ghost hunters did a show from there once and found nothing. I'm not sure why they never bothered going to the lodge next door to hunt. They'd probably turn up all kinds of things, and stuff happens regularly there. Maybe the company doesn't want that kind of publicity. Guess I ruined that. Should you ever happen to do some hunting, things seem to happen mostly between 3 and 5 in the morning. I've shared my home experiences, but never my work ones. There is one place I worked for a year that to this day still freaks me out. This place had 2 floors and a basement in use. It was a bakery, and I often worked in the second floor and main floor kitchens alone. I was the only evening baker who worked there, and during the week, especially that left me alone, for about 5 hours, with the exception of the person who worked the front counter. The main and second floor kitchens were normal, nice and well lit. The basement was purely storage, with a door at the stairs that was closed and locked at night. The basement had a walk-in freezer and fridge that was fairly large, with tons of containers, boxes, old equipment, and even holiday decorations. It was a classic unfinished basement though. Super dark, with a couple naked bulbs as the only light sources. Lots of spiders no matter how much we cleaned, and a concrete floor. Basically just dark, dank, and creepy. But we didn't have to be down there much, so it didn't really matter. Now, the front counter attendants were all in agreement. The place was haunted, and there was something especially creepy about the basement. I quickly was enlisted to do all the closing things in the basement, as at the time, I had no fear of it. So I'd go down there, turn off the lights, and close the door at the end of the night. For a while it was fine. Just the occasional thing falling for no reason, maybe a creepy feeling here or there, but nothing that couldn't be explained away. But one night, I went down, and as I turned off the light, the door to the basement slammed shut, leaving me in absolute darkness. I was terrified, but rationalised, door jam must have fallen out. I nervously whispered to myself as I walked over to open it. The second I opened that door, I heard the sound of someone running up behind me. I didn't even look, just rushed through the door and slammed it behind me before rushing up the stairs to where the front counter girl was, so I wouldn't be alone. I didn't want to feed into the general fear, so I kept this to myself for some time, until another co-worker said the exact same thing happened to them on one of my days off. I shared my experience, and from then on, when we worked together, we would close things up together. This, unfortunately, still left me on my own when she was away. On the weekends, I also opened, which meant having 2 days off I would be alone in the bakery from 5 AM to 7 AM. Part of being the first one in was putting on coffee, and I gladly did, needing the boost of energy to wake me up. As I went to pour myself a cup one morning, I was startled to see a stack of cups fly over, like someone had smacked them. They went all over the floor, one even flying across the counter. I was so early into my shift, I just tried to ignore it. I quickly cleaned up, made my coffee, and got to work, all the while refusing to listen to music as I normally did. I was glancing around, worried something else would happen, and didn't calm down until the next person came in at 7. Now, my final experience came in my last week of working there. I was leaving for a job closer to home, and everything was going well. There was one day, I went to put a tray of something in the freezer and get some containers. As I left the walk-in, I looked to the back of the basement, saw someone step behind a shelf. I knew it wasn't the girl working, as she was much shorter than whoever this was, so I called out another co-worker's name. He often came in to settle a couple of things up, if he forgot to before his shift ended, and it wouldn't be the first time I'd been startled by him showing up. But it wasn't him. As I walked around the basement, it quickly became apparent it was empty, and I had just acknowledged whatever it was in this place. Something I learned much later could be very bad for me. Needless to say, I was very happy to leave and get away from all that. I've worked in quite a few places before and since, many of which people claim are haunted, but never have I worked somewhere where those claims were proven as thoroughly as that place. We'll start with about 2 months ago. I was sleeping in. My boyfriend was already at work. In my half-asleep state, I felt someone's hands as they pulled the blanket over my shoulders and placed my cat right next to my head on the pillow. Now, at first, I figured it was my boyfriend, but when I thanked him later that night, he insisted it wasn't him. I thought maybe he was messing with me, but then I remembered that it had been him he would have kissed my head, and I clearly remember him doing so as he headed out the door sometime earlier. Next was a couple of weeks ago. I was sitting on my couch when a painting that hangs right over where my head was fell. It's not a big painting, but it would have definitely hurt if it smacked me on the head. It didn't though. Instead, it seems like it was pushed aside as it fell, so it ended up landing on the cushion beside me. This isn't the first time things have fallen off the wall. The drywall is very thin, so hanging things can be a challenge. At least now I know there's something looking out for me. And of course the cats. Oh, the cats. Well, those little jerks got in a fight a couple days ago. We were sleeping and very annoyed. I woke up and went to separate them. As my orange tabby tried getting away from her tuxedo brother, he chased her and stopped very suddenly, looking up, like looking at something. They fight like this all the time, but it doesn't stop until you force them away. To my tuxedo cat, it's playing, but the orange tabby doesn't like it. So I usually have to stand right in front of him and make him go somewhere else. I watched him from the stairs as he tried going through the living room doorway to get to where my other cat was, then get stopped and turned around. Like someone put their hands on either side of him and just flipped him around to look the other way. He huffed as cats do and stalked off back to the kitchen. And after saying a quiet thank you to midair, I went back to bed with Tabby trailing behind me. Whatever is in my house seems very kind but strong, which worries me a bit since I don't want to accidentally piss it off and have it come after me. I wonder if it's the ghost of someone who committed suicide, since that is tragically a regular occurrence in the military housing where we live. Background. I grew up in the country. We had lots of strange, bizarre things happen to us during that time. Aliens, paranormal, etc. I lived in a house surrounded by fields and forests and no cable or internet. Not that those were really a big thing back then anyway. So I spent a lot of my time outdoors. This happened when I was in my early teens. My best friend and I were driving to go bring some food to my dad and his friend, who were working late at night on some scrap metal down the way from us. To get where they were, there were two ways to go. One was the normal paved back road, and the second was a long old dirt road that people didn't really go down. The dirt road was surrounded by trees on both sides, had some sketchy older abandoned houses on either side, and a very old cemetery at the end. After we brought the food to them, we decided to take the old dirt road back as a joke. We used to walk that road every now and then during the day, even though it creeped us out, but we tried to stay away from it at night. We were both laughing about how the other one was too scared to go down it. She was driving, and we were laughing and listening to music when we made the turn onto the road. It was a right-hand turn, so in order to make the full turn, she had to sweep her headlights across the cemetery. I remember looking at the graves, and that's when I saw her. It was an all-white figure in the shape of a female with a long dress and long hair. She was standing between the cemetery and the forest. I stared at her for what I felt was 5 or 10 seconds before she vanished, and then I continued to stare at that spot for a good 10 seconds longer. Once I kind of came out of it, I realised that the car had stopped. I have no idea for how long. My friend and I were both very quiet, and we both kind of looked at each other, like, what the hell? Neither one of us really said anything for a little while, but I finally asked her if she had seen something, and she said she did. Not wanting to say what I saw first, I asked her what she saw, and she described the figure exactly as I had above. Interestingly, neither of us were afraid. I remember when I saw her, everything kind of went in slow motion. Even though there was music going on in the car, it was quiet, and I definitely don't remember the car slowing down or stopping. I remember being in awe and thinking she radiated beauty, and she still crosses my mind to this day. I've been back there many times during both the night and day, and I haven't seen anything like it since. We got to the cemetery around 2:30 AM, and we began walking around. First to the tombstone where the possession happened, which is the oldest part of the cemetery, but nothing happened. We walked around to various other places, including a massive statue of an angel, like being about 15 foot high. I got the heebie-jeebies, but nothing unusual. This cemetery is fairly large, and after this section, we had one more we wanted to check out before we went home. At this time, it was probably about 3:30, 3:45. We approached the final section we had wanted to check, slightly disappointed. This section is near the wood line, for context. As we approach, we start to hear noises over by the wood line. Figured it was probably a rodent or something, nothing unusual, but we check it out anyway, and we don't find anything. Disappointed yet again, we turned to leave. I pass a grave of a soldier that died a long time ago. As I pass, I hear leaves crunching behind me, and my shirt is pulled back to the point it's stretched across my chest. Obviously at this point I'm freaking out. I turn around to see if a tree branch could have gotten me, but the only branch near me was about 6 feet above my head. I told my friend and he said he didn't notice anything. I was in the Marine Reserves at the time. I feel the soldier knew that, and that's why it reached out. Nothing else happened after that and we left. Like I said, nothing crazy, but that's my 2 cents. This experience happened several years ago, when I was still in elementary school. My dad and I went to visit some relatives on the Blackfeet Reservation, which we did often. When we arrived at my aunt and uncle's trailer, the first thing I did was run in to see my aunt. As I went past the bedroom in the hallway, I noticed an old woman and old man in the room. One was sat next to the bed, and one was laying on the bed. When I reached my aunt, who was in the furthest bedroom, we hugged, and she gave me a kiss. And I asked her who the people were in her daughter's bedroom. My aunt looked at me suspiciously and asked what I meant. I told her that I saw an old man and an old woman in her daughter's room. My aunt became angry and said that I lied, and there was only one person in that room, and that was her father. The woman could not have been in the room because she had died a year before. Later, when my aunt told my dad what I had said, he told her that I couldn't help myself and that seeing things like ghosts was something children were able to see. I still went to visit my aunts and cousins. I just learned to keep things to myself, knowing that if I were to see something again, it would only frighten some people. My friends lived in a small 2-bedroom house. On occasion, my friend would allow people to stay with her. When this particular incident happened, my friend, we'll call her T, had 3 people living with her. There was a woman, the woman's son, about 3 years old, and her boyfriend. On this particular afternoon, the little boy was laid down for a nap in T's bedroom. About an hour after he went to sleep, the adult in the house was startled by screaming coming from the bedroom the child was in. When T reached the bedroom, she tried to open the door, but it wouldn't budge. The other 2 adults tried as well, but no luck. They could hear the child screaming and saying that there were ugly faces in the wall and that they were trying to get him. The door gave way not too long after they tried to open it, and the boy was rescued, but scared out of his wits. T inspected her bedroom and couldn't find anything that resembled a face or faces. When she called me and asked me to come over, she sounded shaken up, and when I got to her house, she explained what had happened. Context: I think the reason she called me is because of my upbringing. I was raised in a semi-traditional Native American home. My dad was a medicine man, so I had some knowledge about certain religious things, as far as Chippewa Cree and MT are concerned. She explained to me after the incident that the woman's boyfriend had recently learned about his Native American heritage and had delved headfirst into the culture. He really had no idea how to conduct any kind of ceremony, and he had practiced some kind of ritual in T's home. So I concluded that because of what he had done, he may have brought something into her home. Nothing further happened after that day, or prior in my friend's home. Her guests left not too long after that incident, and I will never forget that story. Growing up, I lived in a low-income housing complex. I had heard stories that the apartments were haunted, but I didn't really believe it. Well, one afternoon, my mind was changed. My best friend lived directly behind me in another apartment building, and we hung out so much, she and I became family. We spent the night with each other, I met a lot of her family and vice versa. One day my friend said that her family, herself and 2 of her aunts, were going to the reservation for the weekend, so that left me finding my own entertainment. I was in the front of my apartment playing in the yard, and someone caught my attention in an apartment kitty corner from me. I would clearly see a woman walking back and forth in the bedroom window. The apartment's a 2-story. The reason I noticed the woman was the fact that she was wearing pigtails on either side of her head. Now, my friend's aunt had moved into that apartment a few months before, and I knew her. As I watched her walk back and forth a few times, I just shrugged my shoulders and went about my business. When I spoke with my friend a few days later, I'd asked why her aunt was wearing pigtails, because she was older than us, and I thought it was unusual for an adult to wear pigtails. My friend asked, when did I see her aunt in pigtails? And I told her, when you were in Browning. My friend said, my aunt was with me. No one was at her apartment. That was unsettling information, to say the least. In the same apartment building, I had a friend that lived directly across from me. When this instance happened, I was in elementary school. One day, we decided to play together in the front of our apartments. Towards the end of the day, closer to dusk, my friend and I decided to climb a tree that was closer to my apartment. The tree had 2 large branches that split into a V shape that were large enough for the 2 of us to climb into and sit. While we were climbing into that area, I recall over and looking into my living room window and saw my dad sitting on the couch watching TV. My friend could see him as well. And for whatever reason, my friend and I stared straight ahead, and we both saw my dad walking from the parking lot into the apartment building across from us. We both looked at each other, and then back in the front window of my apartment, and saw that my dad was still there watching TV. Needless to say, my friend ran home and I ran inside my apartment. Several years later, I ran into my friend, and she said ever since that happened, she was afraid of me, and explained why she never hung out with me again. I guess what we saw was my fault. A few years ago, I was living in an older house in a small university town in northern Idaho. I had been living in that house with 3 other roommates for a few years at that point. My roommates had come and gone. My mental health was an ebb and flow, just like any other person. At this point, my sister was living with me and had experienced her own paranormal things that I was indirectly connected to. But for the purpose of this post, I want to just focus on one particular experience that I had with a little girl. This particular night, I had done my nightly routine, washed my face, brushed my teeth, scrolled through Instagram, the works. It was just like any other night. Eventually, I took my phone out of reach and fell asleep. I woke up in the middle of the night, not completely unusual. I usually wake up once or twice during the night. It's pretty rare for me to sleep through the whole night. Usually, I just turn over and go back to sleep, like usual. But this night wasn't usual by any stretch of the imagination. There's one window in my bedroom which faces the neighbour's porch light. They very rarely turn it off, so there's always a certain amount of light coming through my window into my room. But when I woke up, everything was dark. I didn't immediately think anything of it. I mean, at some point the porch light would have to burn out and be replaced. Honestly, it didn't even cross my mind. Something was up. My anxiety, something I'm medicated for, immediately spiked. My heart began to race, and any ounce of tiredness I had in my eyes was gone as I stared wide-eyed at a little girl. Across from me, crouched by my bookshelf, only about 2 feet tall, maybe less, was a grey little girl. She looked emaciated. Her hair was almost sticky looking and matted. She was wearing a nightdress, think Little House on the Prairie, that was shredded at the bottom and dirty. She was crouched almost like a frog, and it was almost like she was soaking up whatever light there was that was coming from the window, making the room completely dark except for a grey light emanating from her. If that was all it had been, I think I would have just rolled over and gone back to sleep. I had done something similar to a shadow figure over my bed previously, but it was her face. Her face told me she wasn't some innocuous child, spirit, ghost, whatever. She was something awful, and something I needed to fear. Her eyes were very large, and she had no eyebrows. Her matted bangs covered most of her forehead, so I could focus on her white iris and goat pupils. If that wasn't enough, she was smiling at me. But it wasn't a sweet smile, it was a menacing, evil grin. It stretched from ear to ear and bored into my soul. Once I realized what was going on, that there was an evil-looking child in my room, I went into fight or flight. All I could get myself to do was hide underneath my covers. I didn't scream, jump out of my bed and run. Nothing. I was so scared I couldn't move. Eventually, I knocked myself out of whatever terrified trance I was in. I had regulated my breathing and my heart rate went back to normal. I peeked out from under my covers and saw that there was nothing there. I was so relieved and figured that somehow a bad dream had kind of leaked into real life for a moment. I got up from my bed, weary but confident that it was an absolutely terrifying dream. I decided if it was a dream, I would go downstairs to grab a glass of water. When I have bad dreams and I don't move around, I can get sucked back into it. And from my reaction to this one, I absolutely did not want to do that. So I got my glass of water, climbed back up the stairs and walked down the hall to my bedroom and put a half-full glass of water on my windowsill. I didn't have anything else to put it on by my bed. The entire house was silent. I managed to fall asleep again. I don't know how much later, but I woke up again. The room was again so dark. I immediately knew something was wrong. Again. I searched for the little girl across the room by my bookshelf, and she wasn't there. I was relieved, but I knew there was something off. Slowly, I realized that there was light coming from the side of my bed, and it was that grey light. I turned my gaze downward to the edge of my bed, and there were those eyes. Those white goat's eyes and the sticky, matted bangs. Then there was that smile. I could feel the weight of that glass of water on my bladder at that moment. The menacing, evil smile stretching ear to ear. I couldn't see the rest of her body. She was so close to me. All I could see was her eyes, looking up at me, and the enjoyment she was receiving from scaring the ever-living shit out of me. This time I screamed. I yelled my sister's name and threw the covers back over my head and cried. This wasn't right. I'd done everything right. I went and got a glass of water. I shouldn't still be in this awful dream. I don't know how long I stayed under the covers. I must have eventually fallen asleep, because the next morning, I woke to the morning sunlight streaming through my windows and birds chirping outside. It took a minute to remember what had occurred the night before. I immediately went to tell my sister what happened, and that I was very annoyed she didn't come to my rescue. After I told my sister, I came back into my room and noticed that the glass of water had fallen onto the carpeted floor. So I did get a glass of water. I wasn't just dreaming. I must have knocked it over when I reacted so fearfully to the second approach from the girl. Anyways, that's what happened. I'm wondering if anyone else has had an experience with something similar. A ghost girl? My cousin suggested it was a demon in the form of a girl, feeding off of my fear. I'm not so sure about that, but I'm sure of one thing. I never want to see her again.